Gaza bombed, tanks roll in next.
The fields right behind me are full, not of crops, but of tanks and armored personnel carriers of the Israeli Defense Forces.
True scale of war now looms. Hamas has fled, innocents bombed. Hezbollah joins fight, attacks Israel. Will this explode into full-scale war? Is this the end of Gaza and Hamas? India Today reports from Gaza front.
We just left our equipment and ran for safety.
India Today is at ground zero in Israel, and I am here in Jerusalem.
But there's still a couple of pieces missing to help us understand how something of this scale could have even happened. And I'm going to get right into that. I'm going to decode a part of what we've seen unfold over 4 days. But too many people are not asking the right questions. Here on India Today with two of our reporters in the Gaza war front, I'm going to tell you exactly what we think. I'm Shiv Arur, this is 5 Live, and these are the headlines. Israel death toll mounts to at least 900. Prime Minister Netanyahu warns that he will crush Hamas with enormous force. He has also just dialed the Indian Prime Minister. They spoke on the phone a short while ago. At least a dozen Israelis taken hostage. Hamas says no negotiations until Israel stops Gaza attacks. Threatens to hold live televised executions of Israeli hostages for every building bombed in Gaza. A massive humanitarian crisis is now looming in Israel and Palestine. India Today reports from the crossfire. Gaurav Sawant and Ashutosh Mishra report from the epicenter of the frontier between Israel and the Gaza Strip.
We just left our equipment and ran for safety. As of now, that rocket has been intercepted. No damage on ground, no loss of property.
Disturbing images of the moment Hamas attacked music festival in Israel emerge. Young festival goers at this rave party overnight seen ducking for cover and rockets rain down on them before the terrorists arrive. Meanwhile, back in India, no relief for Sanjay Singh, arrested Aam Aadmi Party MP. ED custody extended till 13th October in the Delhi Liquorgate probe. Viewer, it's been 4 days since the Hamas terrorist group inflicted the biggest single-day damage on Israel in the country's entire history. You've spent the last 4 days watching those terrifying images of the attack from the Gaza Strip, and now Israel's very familiar response, dropping thousands of bombs from fighter jets on Hamas-controlled territory. With hundreds of Israeli hostages in Hamas captivity, and Israel all set to scale up its total blockade of Gaza with a full-fledged invasion from the ground, this war could break all previous cycles of the Israel-Palestine conflict. In the past, when Israel has come under attack, the country has launched similar punitive counterstrikes on Palestinian territory with an overwhelmingly unequal force balance in Israel's favor, usually bringing fighting to an end in a matter of days or maximum a couple of weeks. But what the Hamas did on Saturday wasn't just any attack. In terms of the damage to life, in terms of how Hamas has managed to undermine Israel's world-famous intelligence and security layers, and in terms of the sheer scale of this provocation, the response this time will necessarily be unprecedented. And we're looking at the opening scene of that Israeli response as we speak. 4 days into this conflict, the question we've all been asking is, how could this have happened? Is such a colossal intelligence collapse even possible? How can Hamas, even with foreign help, manage to craft such a deadly, effective, sustained and total undermining of perhaps the world's most potent and hyper-alert defense and intelligence system, the one that Israel enjoys? Sure, Hamas could have undermined a part of Israel's defenses, but to undermine them flawlessly over months it would have taken to plan this attack is something that doesn't go down so easily, does it? I'm sure you agree with me, viewer. Is it possible that Israel's Mossad, its external intelligence agency, its deep cover assets, its human intelligence, its airborne surveillance, networks, communications intelligence, systems, anti-rocket sensors, border detection systems, real-time intelligence system, signal intelligence, and counter-intelligence systems all failed in one deadly symphony? Is that even possible? Or is it that Hamas did what the terrorist group did, was simply spend months and years simply studying and identifying very difficult to detect cracks in this gargantuan Israeli defense shield, meticulously stitching together a plan that made these cracks work together with each other? Several of these cracks are already apparent now. For instance, Israeli border sensors are all pointed into Gaza. They're all pointed with their gaze pointed into Gaza, which meant that once this huge number of Hamas terrorists had breached the border defenses, they had literally no Israeli sensors looking at them. This is why the Hamas death squads went on that unchecked killing spree for hours after the infiltration, because the Israeli forces just didn't know what to do at that point of time, and it took hours before they could hit back. Another major Israeli crack were the border systems themselves. Hamas terrorists clearly spent months figuring which sections of the border fence were least guarded. They chose precisely those 15 points to breach. But how did they know which 15 points? While Hamas terrorists were scrutinizing these and several other cracks in the Israeli shield, the Hamas leadership was doing something that perhaps begins to explain why Israel was taken by absolute and total surprise, perhaps for the first time in its existence. Over 2 years, Hamas had been visibly lulling Israel into the belief that it was done fighting, it did not have any more stomach for war, and wanted to govern the Gaza Strip, that it was a new era of normalcy on the path of parallel prosperity, that Hamas was changing its colors. Of course, they were not talking about peace, but they were giving the impression that the wars of the past were over. For reasons still unclear, it seems like Israel was lulled into a false sense of security. Now, this complacence, if it indeed was that, coupled with a sustained cocktail of insidiously planted false intelligence and diversionary tactics, maybe compelled Israel to believe somehow either that Hamas was no longer a potent threat requiring all of Israel's hyperactive defense layers, or that the threat was actually elsewhere, maybe in the West Bank. Another crack that Hamas clearly saw was Israel's over-reliance on technology. Drones, underground sensors, radars, motion detectors, new artificial intelligence tools designed to flag up suspicious movements of any kind, perhaps also lulled Israel into the impression that its defenses were impregnable and that such technology could never fail like humans can. This may have parallelly resulted in an under-reliance on conventional intelligence, human assets, and a possible catastrophic failure of counterintelligence, detecting and destroying moles in your midst, people who've infiltrated your own systems and are undermining you from within. When all this implausibly perfect planning was done, Hamas decided to execute it by exploiting one final crack in the Israeli shield, and that was to completely overwhelm. Hamas had clearly concluded that Israel's security systems were designed to detect small groups of terrorists or rockets, but not a military-scale assault by land, sea, and air, like a military would. And that's with 1,000 terrorists and thousands of rockets at once. Hamas appears to have literally overwhelmed, even smothered Israel's defenses, stretching them beyond their limit and rendering them virtually ineffective for crucial 4 hours. 4 hours for those terrorists who were captured on camera, killing indiscriminately and taking hostages unchecked. That was all the time that they actually needed. But there's still a piece missing. How could all this happen so easily, even with all that I've just shared? What are we not seeing? What are we missing? There's plenty that we don't know, viewer, and I will admit that first off. But two things we know for sure at this stage. One, Israel's hard-earned reputation for being an intelligence powerhouse will never be the same again. And two, this could be the final end of Gaza. Now, as Israel ramps up its counteroffensive against Hamas, with all the brutal force at its command, the death toll continues to mount for both Israel and Palestine. Israel has never suffered a single-day loss of this scale, 900 Israelis at the very least. But the country is leaving no stone unturned to avenge this surprise attack by Hamas on Saturday morning. India Today's Gaurav Sawant is on the front lines of Gaza to show us how Israel is executing this counterattack.
The fields right behind me are full, not of crops, but of tanks and armored personnel carriers of the Israeli Defense Forces. Their resources are all being put in place to carry out that major assault should there be a need here in southern part of Israel, the Gaza Strip not far from where we are. The breach at multiple locations in the Gaza Strip, you already have Israeli tanks that have been deployed there to ensure that Hamas fighters and terrorists cannot come in there from there once again. While there are some troops deployed there, other troops are clearing whatever pockets of resistance of those terrorists remain inside Israel. And then these forces, they are here now in big numbers. Now to carry out the assault, you have the main assault body that's behind me. Then you have the logistics camp that's also not far from here. Food, fuel, resources, other supplies, all of them being put together in place. This is an indication that Israel is prepared for a long haul. Also, just a moment ago, you heard the Iron Dome system go up behind us, which means from Gaza Strip, the Hamas terrorists are still launching some rockets, but they're not in a position to carry out major strikes anymore because the number of rocket attacks, we are told, are down by less than half compared to yesterday and the day before that. This is an indication that Israel has successfully taken out most of the threat, but some threat remains. You can hear the fighters in the sky, you can hear the Iron Dome system take out any incoming threat. You also hear the drones that are constantly in the skies, keeping a hawk eye on every development across the fence. In Gaza, there have been massive assaults that have been carried out, and this perhaps is a trailer of what is to come in the days and weeks ahead. Gaurav Sawant in Sderot, near the Gaza Strip in southern Israel, for India Today.
India Today's Ashutosh Mishra is also on the war front and in places where violence has erupted, where things are affected. He travelled from Ashkelon near Gaza to Jerusalem, one of the biggest cities. Here's his ground report.
Now the Hamas is also doing precision attacks, not just random rockets, as they know. They have seen the vulnerability of the Iron Dome, the air defense system of Israel. In fact, we have also been advised by the police personnel, since this area also dominated by the residents of the Arab countries. So they say because of this conflict situation, let me turn the camera security apparatus, and that will give you another idea that what sorts of not just Gaza. Many believe that Sderot is one of the areas, Sderot, which remains the border between Gaza and the Israel territory. So most likely there are the bunkers that were made, the shelter, those were made for the people. That could have been potentially used by these organizations, these terror outfits, where they are hiding. But it is also believed that many in a hostage-like situation, if you want advantage, you also take them along to your safe territory in case of there is a negotiation required. I'm here in Jerusalem at the ground zero, and these are the measures at every point and check. There are heavily armed police personnel guarding and in fact checking every vehicle. Remember, Jerusalem also remains the area where you have a mixed population, both Jews and also Arabs, Arabian residents living. So that also makes it vulnerable. So the frisking, checking, everything that remains very grim at every point. In fact, my passport was just also checked because they are also checking upon the journalists who are coming from the Middle East nation. So that explains the furious situation as we go further in the town. Of course, this is being Monday and usually peak time of the traffic. Mostly it looks deserted, not many people out on the road. In fact, even yesterday several rockets were fired, and there are a few places just in the outskirt of the Jerusalem where the rockets were fired, but the defense system of Israel quite responded. But here even the Jerusalem is coming under the target, and that's where the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the iconic Jerusalem's identity, that's Al-Aqsa Mosque. We are en route to that place, and here all you see barely few people because the situation remains tame. Only heavily, security arrangements that have been made. So via the Damascus gate, we are en route to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and this is the outer boundary of that particular area. So at this remains situation, there is a heavy deployment even of the reserve forces, and they are keeping a very close check on the people, those who are visiting here. This is the precautionary measure. In fact, all the railway stations and the tram stations, those all bunkers and everything that have been put, I can see security deployment here. They're requesting it not to place the camera. So there you see all these heavily guarded police personnels. This has remained a very challenging job for at this moment during this crisis of time. India Today is at ground zero in Israel, and I am here in Jerusalem. And right behind me you see the historic and iconic Al-Aqsa Mosque. And even the Jerusalem is not spared by Hamas group terror organization. Even Jerusalem on Monday, several rockets were fired, and there you see the footfall at the mosque in these areas has drastically reduced, as I'm told by the locals, that the footfall is really reduced. The markets, the old city markets, which are usually fully crowded, are now been totally looking deserted, as the tourist outflow has reduced because of the tension in Israel, and all you see is the deserted look of the Al-Aqsa Mosque here and even the old city in Jerusalem at ground zero. This is Ashutosh Mishra for India Today.
Well, the war is escalating with each passing minute, and we're trying to keep you as up to date as possible with our two reporters on the ground in Israel. Rockets continuing to land in parts of Israel while Israel continues to pound many parts of Gaza. The suspense is increasing now over what comes next. It's expected to be, after the end of airstrikes, a full-scale ground invasion of the Gaza Strip by Israeli forces. Gaza is being bombarded from the air by F-16 and F-15 fighters of the Israeli Air Force. Many neighborhoods have been converted into absolute rubble. Hundreds of Palestinians have already been killed. Israeli Defense Forces have said they've arrested 21 Hamas terrorists so far. The Palestinian Health Ministry says at least 770 people have been killed and 4,000 wounded in the Israeli airstrikes, among them 140 children and 120 women. These are claims that Israel says are false figures and that those killed are only Hamas terrorists. Here's a report a video that's been put out by a Palestinian woman in Gaza during the airstrikes.
Okay. During war times, all the neighbors, they just leave their door open, so you can just enter your neighbor's house. It's okay. For my neighbors, they didn't evacuate as well. They have their windows down. Here are their windows. And here is the family. They're gathering all together, also in a place far away from the window. just trying to explain things, but I think you can hear them now. I'll go check on my parents. Now, we're inside the house right now, and literally we can't breathe. That's the view from the window, and I can't keep it open. That's the view from the balcony. There is literally no view. You can't see anything.
I'm bringing in India Today's Gaurav Sawant, who's live with us from Sderot in Israel. Gaurav, among the first Indian journalists to report from the epicenter of where the rockets had landed in Israel, where many of the casualties have taken place. He's now in Sderot, very close to the Gaza Strip. Gaurav, the aerial bombardments continuing relentlessly from the Israeli side. The big question now is when that big ground offensive is going to begin into Gaza, because we understand that's going to be where things are really going to change. What are you hearing from the ground?
Shiv, the question now is when and not if that ground offensive takes place, because now Israel has its systems completely in place, and right now we've fallen back on Ashkelon. This is the municipal office in Ashkelon. It's also very close to the police station, and this is where you notice that there are a number of soldiers, a number of police officers, a number of other officers who've all assembled here because some rockets fell a short while back, while we were reporting from this point. There was a siren, there was a bomb alert. Everyone rushed into the bomb shelter that's right behind me. There you see the bomb shelter. People are still around because the threat still remains. But people have just come out, some for a smoke, some just to ease off, because imagine living under the threat of rockets falling at any time. So people also say enough is enough. We are not scared anymore, and we are coming out to once again rebuild our lives. Now rockets have fallen even in this area where we are, Shiv. But yet, if you notice that houses are being put together once again, people are returning to their localities. I want to show you that house, Shiv, that building on top. A rocket fell here, destroying this house. Now, this is also one area where Hamas had a free run, Shiv. Hamas terrorists had a free run in this locality, in this area. And now efforts are being made to ensure that that never happens again. So this is a two-pronged strategy. The first prong of that strategy is reinforce this area. What is happening right now? You perfectly described what went wrong, on the 6th and how Israel was overwhelmed. Now some of those lessons have been learned, and every locality is being strengthened. Every colony is being strengthened.
Yes.
The moment that happens, the breaches have now been completely covered. Shiv, you have the Israeli tanks deployed there, the armored personnel carriers deployed there, and then the forces are now amassed. The moment they get the go-ahead, they will go and occupy all the territory that is to be occupied to remain on higher ground and to take complete control of that area, Shiv, so that Hamas is not in a position to strike Israel ever again. That's what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said. That is what the soldiers on ground intend to do.
Gaurav, you're in the best possible position to throw some light on some of the most difficult questions. One of them is, where is the Hamas leadership? All this bombing taking place in Gaza may be bringing down those buildings, but there is an increasing sense that this is like a deja vu. The Hamas may be hiding somewhere else entirely. What is the sense you're getting about that?
You have minister.
Yes.
It's minister.
Yes. You're absolutely right. Where is the leadership of Hamas? Well, Israel says some has been taken out, including one of the deputy commanders of Israel. One of course, still is to be taken out, and some are hiding in Beirut. That, at least that is what intelligence inputs seem to indicate. But there are also ministers of the government who are now coming here and talking to locality people. Shiv, ministers on ground reassuring people that their issues will be sorted out. But that's at the civilian level. At the military level, the intelligence agencies say that all that they've taken out so far are the main control centers of the Hamas leadership, whether it's their logistics spaces, their command and control sector, some centers where the fighters were. As far as the leadership is concerned, Israel's intelligence says some are in Beirut, some may have fled to Iran. Those on ground are being decimated.
Gaurav, one final question before I let you go, because I'm getting the sense that you might need to move from there. There's some movement over there. But, you know, are there still attacks coming in from Gaza? Which means that there are still rocket positions over there. When we spoke to you a short while ago, we could hear the Iron Dome system activating. So there are still rockets being fired, that means.
Oh, absolutely. One rocket was fired just an hour ago when we were here. I was live and we had to rush in. In fact, I want to quickly have a conversation with Rika Shai. She is from Ashkelon. She's a political leader here in Ashkelon. And Rika Shai, are rockets still falling in your locality? What is this that we hear right now?
Unfortunately, yes, but these rockets always are falling in Ashkelon on the civilians that not armed. Children, women, everybody is hurt here. Look at the building, nobody is free, walking free here.
But even today rockets fell,
yes,
even
yes.
today.
Even today, you have been in the, you hear the sirens,
yes.
And you go inside the safe zone.
Yes.
So this is our reality every day, every night, all our lives is like this.
So if I may, there's one question that we in India are very curious to know.
Yes.
Why is it that Israel, with its best intelligence, with its best electronic intelligence, with its weapon locating radars, with operations going on from like Saturday, these operations started. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, now Tuesday. Why haven't all those rocket firing locations been taken out?
Because we are the Israeli and we are very human. Because we are taking consider that there is in Gaza women, children. We let him go before we are bombing all the city of Gaza. So we are very human. They are not. They are very cruel. They slaughter children. They abuse women. They're doing something that animals they even not animals, devils.
So, and right now the threat remains to Ashkelon, to Esderot, where we had gone
Yes.
earlier. That threat still remains.
Yes, always. It's our life. We live like this.
Okay.
And now it's a war. It's a very difficult thing now.
And all these ground forces, they will enter Gaza?
Yes, they enter, but they still waiting that everybody, that innocents can go to Egypt or go to other places before they hit the terrorists.
Okay, but all these troops are massed at the borders, they will go in.
Yes.
Okay. Shiv, so that's the position on ground right now. Even when you and I were speaking, we could hear the Iron Dome, and just about an hour ago, 2 more rockets came in, but the Iron Dome system was able to take them out. The frequency has reduced, but the rocket attacks haven't stopped completely. Houses are still being destroyed. They're falling in fields, which means that their firing may not be as accurate as it was initially, but the threat remains. There still is clear and present danger in this part of southern Israel, Shiv.
Gaurav, thanks very much. Please stay safe. We're going to keep coming back to you. Gaurav, in a location that came under rocket attack just an hour ago. So stay safe, Gaurav. Try and take cover between your reports and we'll keep coming back to you on that. It's day 4 since the attack by Hamas. And the situation on the ground, as you can see from Gaurav's report and the pictures that are streaming in, has only been escalating. Israel has continued to bomb the neighborhoods in Gaza, and the Hamas continues to fire rockets, at least from some positions. India Today's crew at the epicenter, and you've heard from both of them, Ashutosh and Gaurav, are reporting from an area nobody else has reached so far. A devastating assault that has left open a new deadly chapter in West Asia. Just take a look at these pictures and watch this report.
Israel's intense retaliation on the one hand, the Israeli counting their dead on the other.
Israel didn't start this war. Israel will finish it. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies.
On day 4 of the war against Hamas, Israel increased airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. It sealed it off from food, fuel, and other supplies. The resounding echoes of detonations rolled across the Gaza region. The Israeli strikes persisted throughout the night and into Tuesday morning, accompanied by the unmistakable presence of the multiple fighter jets soaring above the vicinity.
Reach at multiple locations in the Gaza Strip. You already have Israeli tanks that have been deployed there to ensure that Hamas fighters and terrorists cannot come in there from there once again. While there are some troops deployed there, other troops are clearing whatever pockets of resistance of those terrorists remain inside Israel. And then these forces, they are here now in big numbers.
At least 900 people have died in Israel. More than 680 Palestinians have been killed since Hamas launched an unprecedented surprise assault on Saturday.
Right behind me you see the historic and iconic Al-Aqsa Mosque, and even the Jerusalem is not spared by Hamas group terror organization. Even Jerusalem on Monday, several rockets were fired, and there you see, the footfall at the mosque in these areas has drastically reduced.
Israeli military has brought additional forces near the border. A major question was whether it will launch a ground assault into the tiny Mediterranean coastal territory. Israel's last ground attack happened in 2014.
Our Air Force is attacking hundreds of Hamas Islamic Jihad targets in Gaza. We follow international law while exercising our right and responsibility to protect our civilians.
Israeli authorities believe Hamas has taken up to 150 hostages in Gaza. Hamas has claimed it is holding more than 100 captives, including Israeli army officers. A devastating assault that has left open a new deadly chapter in the Middle East. With Ashutosh Mishra in Jerusalem and Gaurav Sawant in Sderot, Israel, Bureau Report, India Today.
And while Israel continues to fight with Hamas in Gaza, which is the southern part of the country, on the northern front in the border with Lebanon, the Hezbollah terrorist group has opened attacks against Israel. And India Today has now touched down in Lebanon as well. We're reporting from Israel, and now my colleague Ashraf Wani is live with us from Lebanon. The Hezbollah, which is a terrorist group that is supported by Iran, has joined the fight, and it has opened attacks on Israeli positions in northern Israel. The question now is, will this war expand into Lebanon? Israel has invaded Lebanon on 2 occasions before. In the 70s and 80s, Israel is moving tanks to the Lebanon border once again. India Today's Ashraf Wani gets us this report from the Lebanon-Israel border, where Deputy Chief of the Israel Army was killed in an encounter with Hamas terrorists.
Today is the 5th day of war between Hamas and the Israel. India Today is the only team which is reporting from the border, which is the center of tension between Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas and Israel. In fact, on Monday, the top army commander of the Israeli army was killed, which is confirmed by Israeli forces now, was killed behind me on this border, because the fighters of Hezbollah and Hamas penetrated from the Lebanon towards the Israel also. Not only they infiltrated from Gaza to Israel, but also infiltrated from Lebanon to the Israeli territory and occupied some of the army checkpoints there. There was a lot of gun battle yesterday behind me on this border between the Hamas and the Israeli army, in which the top army commander of the Israel got first injured, then later he succumbed to the injuries. So far, the highest casualties in 50 years on the Israeli side in clashes with Hamas and Hezbollah. This border has it is being, you can see there is not any kind of a visibility of the security forces, but whenever the rockets are being fired by Hezbollah towards the Israeli positions on those mountain tops which are behind me, because it is the border which here in the Lebanon is called as the Palestinian territory, but Israel occupied it physically and have the checkpoints on all these mountains behind me, and they are being targeted now by the Hezbollah, by rockets here from Lebanon. And also the Israeli army has responded on Monday and Tuesday with some artillery fire. But so far the focus of the Israeli army is on the Gaza, and that is why not only the electric supply, water supply has been cut off to the Gaza Strip, but today also the internet services were suspended in the Gaza Strip by Israel. And in fact, some unfortunate reports coming from the Gaza, what the local media is telling here, that during the last 5 days, at least 6 journalists from different news groups and the television channels had been killed in the attacks by the Israeli forces on Gaza. And this has been confirmed by the Palestinian Authority, but so far nothing has been said by the Israeli authorities on those killings. But one thing is clear, that during the last 50 years, the casualty numbers of the Israeli side is mounting, and on the both sides, the Gaza Strip as well as in the Israel, now the number of casualties has already crossed 1,000, and thousands others are injured on both sides after this conflict. The situation is very tense on the border, which is between the Lebanon and Israel here in Al Amin area, and we traveled from the Beirut almost 300 kilometers, but here the Lebanon police forces are not allowing to proceed further towards the checkpoints of the Israel, but it is visible that how the tense situation here on the Lebanon-Israel border is too. Ashraf Ali, India Today, on Israel-Lebanon border in Lebanon.
And now we're going live to Shashi Tharoor, one of the most erudite voices of the Congress party, who has spoken several times on foreign affairs, live and in conversation on India and Palestine and the Israel war. In conversation with Rajdeep.
And joining me now is the Congress MP from Thiruvananthapuram, someone who's had a wide experience in international diplomacy, also been a Minister of State for External Affairs. Shashi Tharoor, thank you very much for joining me here on India Today. Let's get your stand, Dr. Tharoor, clear. The Prime Minister today has tweeted a little while ago, "I thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for his phone call and providing an update on the ongoing situation. People of India stand firmly with Israel in this difficult hour. India strongly and unequivocally condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations." Is that a stand you also support unequivocally?
Yes, but it's not the whole picture. In other words, we do absolutely stand with Israel when they're being attacked in such a horrendous way and civilians are being killed. But we also do take the broader view in mind, Rajdeep. Our traditional position has always been that both Israelis and Palestinians have the right to live in security and dignity behind safe borders in their own lands. And the fact that in the case of the Palestinians, they've been suffering a dehumanizing occupation for a very long time, and that for 75 years there has been no durable solution to their plight, despite many attempts by the UN, by various states to try and get a solution, that I think remains a matter of great concern. So we don't want to lose sight of that. In other words, we want the Palestinian people to have decent, secure lives. We want the Israeli people to have decent, secure lives. We condemn terrorism, but at the same time, we don't want to see a situation in which the Palestinians feel they have no recourse but to resort to violence. There is a peace process which has been stagnating for many years. And I think that this is something that have to be looked at as a whole, Rajdeep. The immediate situation, yes, Israel and Israeli civilians are being grotesquely treated. There's really been brutal assaults on innocent, ordinary people who are not soldiers or fighters. And I think that's terrorism by any yardstick, and we can't accept that. And I think there, India is absolutely justified in standing with Israel. But in the bigger picture, we also stand with the Palestinian people, and we want to see the Palestinian people obtain their rights to decent lives as an independent state.
The reason I asked you this is because the Congress Working Committee, of which you are a part, as part of their resolution yesterday, stated or reaffirmed their support for the Palestinian cause, for a Palestinian state and a peaceful resolution to the issue, but refused to explicitly condemn Hamas or the terrorism emanating from the Hamas. So you're saying that you see what's happened in Israel as terrorism, but your own party refrained from using the words Hamas or terrorism. And that leads some to believe that the Congress hasn't gone far enough in condemning the acts that have been perpetrated on innocent civilians.
First of all, there was an official statement by the Congress Party the previous day, which was broadly along the lines that I have just responded to, because I myself had issued a tweet at about the same time in which I made precisely this point. So I think for many of us, the position is indeed a balanced one. We're not suggesting that there can be any sort of two-sidedness to terror. There is no excuse for terror. But at the same time, we cannot possibly be thrilled about the long period of injustice to the Palestinian people as well. And that's why I think finding a decent...
But do you explicitly condemn Hamas? Do you explicitly condemn Hamas, Dr. Tharoor? Do you explicitly condemn Hamas and see it as a terrorist organization?
Well, the terrorist organization label is one we're very careful not to follow other countries' leads in these matters. The US considers Hamas a terrorist organization, so does Israel. India has not made any such classification, and I'm going to stick to the Indian position that these are terrorist acts. But to call everybody in Hamas, there are political elements of Hamas who one day we may have to negotiate with, or the Israelis may have to negotiate with. So let me just say these are terrorist acts. There's never any excuse for terrorism. India must condemn it unreservedly, and I agree with the government that they condemned it and they stood with the victims of terror. But we want to lose sight at the same time of the fact that the Palestinians also have rights, and those rights have been systematically violated over a long period of time. Let me say also, when you ask about the Congress position, that there will be more detailed positions. The resolution focused overwhelmingly on domestic affairs, and language that got into the resolution essentially as an afterthought is to remind people of our long-standing commitment to the Palestinian people. But the larger, broader, more nuanced picture will surely emerge in future statements. This problem, sadly, is not going to end in a day or two, and nor should we take any one statement as the total picture or the last word on the subject. We are all aware that there is terrible wrong that's been civilians by Hamas, and that cannot be condoned. And we are seeing images of terrible destruction and killing on the other side. There are civilians dying in Gaza as well. There are journalists who've been killed in Gaza. There's terrible stuff happening on both sides of the border. And now, just as I was waiting to talk to you, I hear your reporter saying that Hezbollah may have been trying to cross the border from Lebanon, which means we're talking about potentially a much wider and more serious war. This is at a time when, in fact, the region seemed to be heading towards peace, where the Arab countries had made their peace with Israel, the so-called Abraham Accords, which brought the UAE in. India itself was part of the so-called I2U2, which was India and the UAE joining with the Americans and the Israelis in collective dialogue. On top of that, there were very strong reports of the Saudis making peace with the Israelis. That, of course, is now on hold, and some say that perhaps Hamas was really targeting that. But the point is that it's sad and tragic when people who are beginning to get used to the idea of living in peace are suddenly confronted once again by war. War never solves anything. I was with Kofi Annan when we met the Israeli foreign minister nearly 20 years ago, and he informed us of the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza at that time, after a long occupation of Gaza. Now, the Israelis are marching back into Gaza, and undoubtedly they have superior strength, and they will probably be once again in occupation of Gaza. And I have no doubt that the situation will not be any different. They will again, at some point, feel they have to cut their losses and leave, because this cycle will keep repeating itself until you have a durable solution. And that is, frankly, what is really needed, what India has been calling for.
What is that? No, but as you said, when you were in the United Nations, there have been efforts made on this for decades. What, according to you, is a solution? And given the scale of the attacks, the audacity of it, the possibility that other countries, especially Iran, Lebanon, the Hezbollah in particular, could be involved, suggests that we could be heading towards a wider war, which makes peace even more difficult. What is that solution that you see happening? I mean, is this the intractable problem of the 21st century?
Well, it seemed that way for 75 years, but in fact, the outlines of a solution have been clear for more than 3 decades. And the solutions are very simple. 2 states living side by side in peace and security, with clearly defined borders, and at the same time with some international guarantees that one will not attack the other. And for this, you need to have responsible and moderate leadership on both sides. The Palestinian Authority did have that leadership, and they did not find an adequate response on the Israeli side. The Israelis under Netanyahu have continued a settlement building, for example, in the occupied territories in the West Bank in particular, which undoubtedly prolonged an occupation that could have been ended with a recognition of a Palestinian state, which still hasn't happened. The formula of 2 states with secure borders for both peoples is the only formula that can solve the problem. But increasingly, actions on the ground are making the 2-state solution more and more unviable. It was getting more unviable as Israeli settlements were spreading across the occupied territories, so there would have been no real room for a Palestinian state. Now it's getting unviable with the attacks from Gaza into Israel, and now Israel's counterattack. Now, if you say Hezbollah has crossed the border, which I had not yet seen until I heard it on your show, then Hezbollah will drag in undoubtedly some elements of southern Lebanon, and also possibly, since both Hamas are backed by Iran, Iran might also become a target. The whole thing becomes incredibly worrying. Americans have, I gather, sent a ship already to Israel, a destroyer, and there's going to be more such international involvement as well. We don't want another wide war. India has always stood for peace in that region.
You know, but in conclusion, Dr. Tharoor, you're saying India has always stood for peace. India also, particularly in recent times, has seen Israel as an all-weather ally, someone with whom we have closer defense cooperation, we have closer partnerships, strategic partnerships emerging. To that extent, would you say that this policy of neutrality that we had towards supporting the Palestinian cause and yet having relations with Israel, that's gone? There's a very special relationship that exists today between India and Israel, and at some level between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah, but you can't personalize these matters. Yes, I think it's important that our Prime Minister maintains good links with other Prime Ministers. I think that's a human thing, and that's always welcome and valuable. But ultimately, national interests trump personal chemistry. And the national interest of India is in seeing that all sides get a fair deal out of this. Yes, Israel has been an invaluable partner, particularly on strategic security matters. They've also been good people-to-people relations. We have, in fact, Indian civilians right now in Israel, one of whom was injured in the rocket attacks from Gaza, and others who are in danger. And we would like very much that Israel look after the security of our citizens in their country as well. So we have a valued relationship with Israel, but at the same time, we have historically stood for justice for the Palestinian people as well, and I don't think it would be right for us to back away from that. So let us make sure that we, in condemning terrorism, don't lose sight of the bigger picture affecting the Palestinians. That is a serious matter, and it's something which goes right back to the days of Mahatma Gandhi before independence, when he took a stand on the idea of a proposed Jewish state. And I must say that for us, that decent where both sides are right, both sides deserve the best kind of approach, is the right thing for India. There is no reason for India to be unilaterally condemning either the Palestinians or the Israelis. We can condemn terrorist actions, but then we should equally be concerned about the denial of long-term rights of the Palestinians, and equally be concerned about the death, devastation, and destruction being visited right now upon the Palestinians as part of the Israeli retaliation. No one is accusing the Israelis of having started this. It's started by Hamas, but their retaliation, including the siege of Gaza, where they've cut off water, electricity, fuel, essential supplies into a strip of land that otherwise can't be provisioned, is actually a pretty dangerous step in humanitarian terms. So I don't think that it's a pure black and white situation, Razi.
Okay, let's leave it there. It's a more nuanced position that you've taken, and one perhaps that needs to be supported across political lines, that while you condemn Hamas and the terror that has taken place against innocent civilians, you've also got to be conscious about the dehumanizing that's taken place over the years of the Palestinian people. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Tharoor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Razi.
Israel-Hamas blood feud returns. All-out war engulfs West Asia.
Okay.
Again you hear another blast.
Fearless reportage and exclusive news breaks.
तो यहाँ से एक ground report दिखा रहा हूँ. किसी भी समय यहाँ कुछ भी हो सकता है.
India's biggest conflict reporters, live and exclusive.
You just heard those sounds of the blast. Is the real images. And look at the massive destruction.
West Asia war through India Today cameras.